carrier market.
Welcome back, everyone, to Brook in the Air. We're about to have a low-cost carrier discussion, which will be a Brook in the Air travel special edition on Aviation Talks here.
And we do apologize for the engine noise and the wind noise. We've been driving it as our last day. And mind you, these opinions that are expressed are Brook in the Air's two hosts. We'll try and back it up with as much information, but most of them will be opinions. Anyway.
You can see the actual article that I posted linked on my site at brookintheairtravel.net. Once again, that's brookintheairtravel.net. And I believe it's also posted on Influential Women, Blogspot,
and Substack. Now, my opinion might deviate a little bit from her, from what she wrote, but I will try and back it up with as much information as I can. Now, while I agree that low-cost carriers are a failing concept, they're failing mostly in the U.S. because there's no rotation. If you look at almost anywhere else in the world, there is a backup to Ryanair. In fact, there's multiple possibilities. And your Asian market is just a complete swath of rotating pop-ups. But it's also geography-based. When you're going from country to country, Europe has a lot more countries in the same amount of space as the United States. And that's not even going to talk about what is Indonesia, which basically requires the ability for people to get from one place to another. And, of course, you've got your different places where people don't require as much luxury unless it's very specific. You've got the people's planes, which are the low cost, and then you've got the luxury, which are when people go on it when they either have enough money or for a special trip. Whereas right now, Frontier is kind of point A to point B. Southwest is not even a true low-cost carrier anymore. And then you've got your connections between United American and Delta, and American just doing well. American
Don't
things.
forget Allegiant.
Well, see, that's the other thing. A lot of our stuff is localized. We've got Allegiant, we've got Sun Country.
Sun Country just bought out, or Allegiant just bought out Sun Country.
Well, again, and everything moves so fast a lot of the time. We don't know, but again, the reason that low-cost carriers are really failing in the U.S., number one, because of fuel. Number two, when it comes down to it, people like to, as if you were to turn the camera towards the front of the vehicle, you could see that many people like to drive here in America more than anywhere else. Indonesia, you can't really drive. Europe, you can drive somewhat, but cars aren't that big of a thing. You've got trains, you've got planes, and everything else. But America, being the car culture, is one of the other big reasons why low-cost carriers are failing. Because it is cheaper, according to some people's minds, to drive.
And to capitalize on that, you have a few of the points that I made in my article. Low-cost carriers tend to use secondary and tertiary airports to save costs, many of which are in, of course, Europe and Asia, because in Europe they're often co-shared with military services and things like that, whereas in the US you don't really have that ability. You also have, as Check Minion said, the fuel cost issue, but they don't really suffer from that in Europe because everything is relatively close together.
Well, and then on top of that, here's the biggest other thing. When you fly low cost in America, you go to a place. Congratulations, you are now in, let's use an example of somewhere close to us. You're now in Peoria, Illinois. Congratulations, you needed to get to, I don't know, Springfield, Illinois. How do you get there? Well, you don't really have that many options because you do not have a robust train system here in America. You do not have a robust bus system in America.
Your best option is to fly from wherever your origin point is to Chicago O'Hare, normally.
At least in our example.
you do have Midway, but very few airlines use Midway. And then drive from Chicago to, say, Peoria, or even Moline,
Springfield,
or
Illinois, wherever
yeah.
you're going. You're basically still then renting a freaking car. And at that point, you could use the logic, depending upon where you're coming from, oh, hey, let me just do renting a car for the full thing. I'll sleep in a couple of hotels. Like, for example, that leads us into the other thing. When it comes to hotels and hostels in Europe, they're, what, 100 euros for a pretty decent one?
About 120 euros for a one-star hotel in Europe. Now, the thing to keep in mind is that 1-star ratings in Europe are different from the star ratings here in the US. You'll encounter a 1-star hotel in Europe, which is the equivalent of a 2 to 3 star hotel here in the US. They're very nice on average in Europe. You will encounter a few stinkers here and there, but generally, on average, they're very nice. You will not have a problem.
And plus, you've got the hostel culture. That, again, that's HOSTEL culture that exists mostly in Europe because they've been doing it for years.
Decades.
Yeah. And this, again, I'm going to give praise to the boomers and everything, which I can't believe I'm doing, but that's beside the point. Because of the culture of traveling across that has been building up. We traveled across Europe in the 70s for bands. That culture has been ingrained into many countries in Europe of expecting tourists on that level, following tours, following bands. Hell, they will follow soccer teams,
oh, yeah,
or in their case football, across the entire continent of Europe. It was so colloquial that, and so much in the beginning, that was one of the big things for the Taken movie of, hey, we're going to follow you two across Europe. That used to be a thing, and that was the freaking 90s, 2000s.
Yeah, the Liam Neeson movie, Taken 2. Yeah.
But that was a thing that was done. People followed the Beatles across Europe.
There's also the population density to consider.
Mm-hmm.
Cities in Europe and Asia are far more dense than cities here in the U.S. Well, I mean, cities like London and Paris and Berlin and Frankfurt and Amsterdam. And in Europe, you have cities like Jakarta and Singapore and Beijing, for that matter. Shanghai, yes, and Hong Kong. I mean, those are huge megacities.
I would actually also argue it's more of a thing of the surface area versus the city size, because when you look at some place like America, in many areas there's a lot of dead zone. Like right now, for example, as we stated, we're going through the state of Illinois. The next big city is, and I know I'm going to butcher this, Gillette. So it's Gillette. And that's like 77 miles away. And then after that, there is Chicago, which is 150. So
9 now.
Yeah, well, the point is, it's a few hours. When you fly on things like Ryanair, which is of course a very much cheaper thing, they charge you $10 for a seat. No frills, nothing, because you're going to be on the plane for what, an hour?
Maybe 2 at most.
Yeah.
Now, Ryanair does have a subsidiary, well, not a subsidiary, I'm sorry. There are 2 competing airlines, but there is a backup if Ryanair doesn't, for some reason, somehow, by some miracle, goes under. There's EasyJet.
Yeah. And I guarantee you also that Ryanair would probably just remake itself. It's not the first time the Irish man in charge of it has made an airline.
Michael O'Leary, yeah. In fact, he was great friends with Herb Kelleher, the founder of Southwest Airlines.
Yeah. But again, that leads us into the failure of low-cost carriers, of Southwest being a perfect example. Southwest lasted for years. They didn't upgrade. They had no frills. They were perfectly fine.
They had no reason to upgrade. They were America's love child, essentially, in the airline industry. I mean, hell, their home airport at Houston Hobby Field was Love Field, with the IATA code LUV. when they were traded on the stock exchange, their sign on the New York Stock Exchange was LUV for love. Their sign on their gates and their airplanes everywhere, their little logo was a blue and red Southwest colors heart-shaped logo.
Yeah.
The heart.
And this is actually a personal hot take of mine, and not everybody may agree with it. Southwest, the original, was killed by the incorrect advancement of technology, and yes, this is coming from a person who loves tech and cybersecurity, and they were also killed by climate change. Because if their biggest death knell, before they had to make massive changes, was a massive winter storm that they could not recover from.
Winter Storm Elliott in 2022, which put Denver into a freeze. And I mean that literally, a deep freeze for about 3 hours, which utterly threw Southwest's entire network into chaos.
But also, we had COVID happening at the same time. And when you stack...
Well, not at the same time, for about 2.5 years.
Well, no. In 2022, we were going through the last vestiges a bit of COVID. Then we had the winter storm on top of it. And even more, the NOTAM system has not been upgraded since the 1970s. So because certain parts were going faster and others weren't, and everybody was trying to do hurry up, everything went into a cascade failure. And let's not forget, we also had the other thing that happened.
Elliott Investment Management.
Well, I was actually going to talk about the CrowdStrike issue that I think also happened in 2022.
It did. Well, CrowdStrike happened in 2023.
Yeah.
Southwest was unaffected because their systems were too old to be affected by CrowdStrike.
But the problem is, even though Southwest systems weren't affected, the airport systems were still affected, which caused even more of a tailspin for Southwest because they couldn't take off.
Yeah.
So that's the other thing to remember about the low-cost carriers. It's not necessarily just them. It's when things don't get upgraded. We also have a very much lack of air traffic controllers because the training for them is a joke and takes too long. So, and yes, that'll still be a little bit political for a second. When you say that you're going to just shove gamers in there and they'll be able to do ATC, it doesn't work that way.
Because for those of you not in the know, our great FAA administrator, Sean Duffy, has decreed that gamers can be put into an accelerated 8-month-long FAA training program to produce hundreds, if not thousands, of more ATCs.
However, I will not entirely blame Sean Duffy or any specific administration for this. So, yes, you're looking at the cat. So here's the other thing to remember. What we are dealing with the air traffic control problem is we are dealing with a decades-long issue. How many presidencies has the ATC been short-staffed?
Oh, gosh, since the mid-70s, so before Carter.
So basically, in almost the entire, what we would consider the mostly modern age, there have never been enough air traffic controllers.
No, at least 7 presidencies now, maybe 8.
So, this is one of those things that I am loath to say it, but is a both sides issue. Because nobody really cares as long as the planes can take off and land without too many issues. So, your ATC has been working fine for the most part, or I should call it more functional.
That's why when people get mad at airports like Newark and O'Hare for being crowded, congested, taking too long, that's not really the airport's fault, nor is it ATC's fault. It's a problem of them being short-staffed and them having no one to replace them, and airlines, like actual aircraft, in danger of running into each other. And trying to park hundreds of aircraft around the airfield. and then get numerous aircraft to take off, or ready to take off rather, and then others to land. I mean, trying to navigate dozens of aircraft around the airport is a dance.
And I know we've gone a little bit off of our low-cost carrier, but trust me, this matters because low-cost carriers add more planes to everything. So it gets interesting in a lot of it.
It does, especially when you consider that they have to use, in Europe and Asia, secondary and tertiary airports, because, this is critical, those airports in Europe and Asia have customs facilities ingrained into them, and if nothing else, are subsidized. They don't have those here in the U.S. There's very few airports that have those by comparison, because customs require a lot of agents and bases which are underneath the airport terminals to staff, and DHS is not cheap about sparing out their agents.
Well, and not just that, here's the other thing to remember. Every single time an airport needs to expand, part of it has to shut down and be limited. So anytime you do expansion, repair work, or anything else on an airport, things slow down. Slow down translates to not as many planes getting to their destination on time, and congratulations, the other airports don't necessarily care. So when you hear the biggest scream, like anybody who's watched, the series Airline about Southwest?
Oh, it's such a good series.
Yeah. It is an old series, comparatively speaking. Yes, I'm calling a 90s series show old. Shocking.
Mid-2000s.
Yeah. Well, 90s, mid-2000s, either way. We're at least looking at 20 years. God, I feel old. Anyways. When weather is affecting somewhere in the country because of the intricate balance that everything goes through, a storm in San Francisco will affect Florida. Yes, I know that seems like a weird concept to a lot of people, but a storm somewhere randomly will affect you.
Which is why if your plane comes in and it's like a crystal clear blue sky day and you're thrilled to be flying, and all of a sudden your flight gets canceled and you're up in arms over the reason why.
Not even canceled. Here, let's use this example. Sorry. So say, for instance, your plane is not there yet. Your plane is an hour delayed, and you're asking why. That plane is having to come from somewhere else. And say, for instance, like when we traveled through the Midwest yesterday and had a big storm go through that was going to hit Topeka, or was going to be the one when we were in Davenport. Planes cannot fly through that, or at least they shouldn't, because those are massive electrical storms, and electricity and lightning can cause planes to do bad things. There's also the whole thing with mesocyclones. They will basically sit there and slam your plane into the ground if you're too
Let's
close.
put this into simple terms. A storm affecting the destination area, say Tampa in this case, will affect a plane inbound in, say, Oakland, California.
Or even just a part of the route.
Because that flight alone is about 6 hours. And they can't make that if they can't be aware of the weather at that time at the destination point.
And it becomes even more of a thing to affect if you're dealing with international travel. For example, say you're going from Europe to China, and this is where it gets very interesting. What is the usual direct route from Europe to China? What do the planes take? What do they fly over?
Russia.
Or sometimes also, we're looking for Ukraine.
Oh, yes.
Basically, they cannot fly over Ukraine, and they cannot fly over Russia right now. So you're basically having to take a gargantuan amount of time to go from, say, for instance, I don't know, Beijing. Let's use that as a ridiculously random example. Or, say for instance, you're going to fly from, I don't know, Tunisia to Baghdad. You kind of can't do that because you're going to go over Iran. And you kind of can't do that at all. So, conflicts matter. Weather matters. Fuel prices may change prices of tickets, but they do not stop things from
The
happening.
gist of this, ladies and gentlemen, is that global conflicts affect aviation and travel. Because anything can provide a huge detriment, sometimes a boost, more oftentimes a detriment. Because the sanctioning of Russia in 2022 meant that airlines, like flight carriers especially, could not commute or not travel to Moscow or St. Petersburg.
Or even over Russia.
Right.
And Russia is a big freaking area. It matters, it changes things. And if you couldn't fly over and around it, over it in any possible way, because of insert reasons here, then you kind of can't. It's the same reason why that you can only go over certain parts of Nevada. You cannot really fly over certain areas that are military bases. Why you cannot fly over certain areas in Washington, D.C., Maryland, and stuff like that, right?
Oh, yeah. Because of restricted airspace.
And you will get yelled at, and they will sick fighter jets on you.
And you will have the option of either deviating to a nearby airfield where they will find you, or they will, and if, worst case scenario happens, shoot you down.
If they cannot reach you. That has happened almost multiple times in the U.S. That has happened multiple times in different parts of the world. Korean Air, straight off its flight path. That was 2022, right?
No, in Korean Air 007 was during the Cold War.
No, that was the other one. Recently that they accused of... anyway, it's happened multiple times. Different countries have taken down full-on passenger planes. Even the U.S. is guilty of it with Iran Air.
Oh, yeah. Now, that was back in the 1990, in the Gulf War. But this affect, and I know we strayed off course from low-cost carriers, but this does affect it because airlines like Air Asia X actually does low-cost long-haul travel from places like Jakarta, primarily, and a couple other cities. Not many, but a couple. And they often fly to places like Paris, Charles de Gaulle, Frankfurt, and London. Because they're very popular. And AirAsia is the only low-cost carrier, I think, actually no, not only, one of only two, with Airbus A350 aircraft.
And the reason I bring it up is because of a very important thing with low-cost carriers that's about to become very interesting. The location is the South China Sea. Basically, you've got Taiwan down there, you've got China down there, you've got Indonesia, you've got Japan, you've got all of those little fun things happening. If that gets declared to be by China or somebody else as a war zone, that means everything is going to have to be deviated around, which means you either are not going to have low-cost carriers flying, or they're going to have to go a different way that'll cost a lot of money. Say, for instance, something happens between India and Pakistan again. That entire area is going to have problems. And low-cost carriers do not have the flexibility larger carriers do when it comes to planes, fuel, and the like.
And I get it. I mean, travelers like you guys just want to see the sights and plan your trips and enjoy...
Go from point A to point B.
Yeah, go from point A to point B, enjoy the world. But, newsflash, I'm sorry, you need to learn something about geopolitics and global conflict.
Well, not even just knowing about geopolitics, just keep an eye on some level of news. Yes, yes, this is where we'd probably do an advertisement for Ground News if we were sponsored. Blah, 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 blah. Anyway. But that's why it's important to keep an eye on all that. It's important to keep an eye out for deals, because there are times that flying is better. But again, that also requires us to take into effect, again, as we stated earlier, weather. And Tropical Storm Hurricane Lala that affected the Hawaii, for example. Because a certain somebody was thinking about going to Hawaii soon to knock it off her travel bucket list.
Not long, but enough to review a hotel and come back. Which also gave me a couple 1,000 miles in great PQPs. We'll see.
For her United stuff. But, as I said, to her, you want to wait because of the weather cleanup. And let's not also forget the fact of something that recently just happened in Indonesia. They had a 7.7 earthquake.
Yeah.
So,
which killed hundreds.
Yeah. So again, weather and certain events matter just as much as geopolitics do. So you need to keep in touch with what is going on in the rest of the world, depending upon if you want to go places.
Oh yeah.
Whether it's the U.S. with its local storms and tornadic activity and sometimes hurricanes, depending upon the time of year, or things like the wildfires that we went through not too long ago. Because here's a news flash. Wildfires affect flights.
The smoke from wildfires drifts up thousands of miles.
And on top of that, if there's wildfires on certain areas, they generate heat, which changes the lift factors of most areas.
Which is why when people complain that the, no pun intended, that aircraft are too heavy or, it took too long to roll down takeoff, yes, these are petty complaints, so people make them. They don't understand that physics governs everything. And people need to understand that their luggage, their own body weight, people in the back of the plane may throw off the weight distribution of the aircraft, and things have to be completely within equilibrium to facilitate the homeostasis of the aircraft to facilitate a very successful takeoff.
Mm-hmm. Because basically, you are going into a metal tube that uses these flat surface wing things to go fast enough to generate lift into the sky that by all definition of physics should most likely not happen. Again, you're in a pressurized metal tube with wings that go through air just enough to float.
And the shape of the wing is designed to cut through the air with aerodynamic force,
while still providing the lift that you need. Because, newsflash, that is why when you stop moving forward on a plane, you drop. Or you start to drop because you do not have that force going through. See? Physics.
Essentially, you are Isaac Newton's biatch.
Mm-hmm. But again, I know it feels like we've gotten away from low-cost carriers, but it matters because low-cost carriers usually grab the smaller planes, the older planes, what they need to survive. They keep them functioning because they have decent mechanics and the like.
Like, 3 of the most successful low-cost carriers out there are Indigo, India's low-cost carrier, which is now vastly bigger than Air India itself.
Yeah, we're gonna have a whole nother discussion on certain people's opinion of Air India for reasons, but I digress.
And how Tata has...
No. We're not gonna talk about it, we're gonna make them work for it.
The other big ones are AirAsia, now under AirAsia X sub-brand, which has actually extremely grown their brand over the past couple of years. And the third one is Ryanair,
which is just on a level of ridiculousness that has been completely unheard of.
And they have defined the low-cost brand since they have really accelerated in 2008.
But anyway, that was the definite, overly ridiculous this level with a lot of rambling and ranting.
Yes.
We are covering this mostly because nobody has gotten onto the websites or these videos and asked, hey, can you cover this? Please give us subjects to talk about. We will be more than happy to.
Please be proactive.
It doesn't matter what the subject is within reason involving aircraft, airlines, we will cover it.
I get it if you don't want to subscribe to my blog. You know, that's fine. But at least be proactive on the channel and the site. Just give me something to discuss.
Once we get back, we will try and go through all of the articles. We've got quite a few. We are not going to apologize for our opinions. We are not going to apologize if it's going to be offensive. This is basically online journalism.
Yep.
Deal with it. Either watch or don't, but we appreciate if you watch because you might find something interesting.
So that's going to cap us off for now. We will come back with a lot more. See you in the air. And remember to visit us at brokenairtravel.net.
Like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff.
Yes.